Staffordshire appears calm and historic, but beneath its halls, churches and woodland lie places shaped by loss where the past still lingers and silence is never truly empty. The gatehouse, standing quietly in the village of Tixall. The gatehouse appears modest and unassuming, a surviving fragment of a once great estate. Yet its calm exterior conceals a history shaped by political intrigue, imprisonment, and execution. Few places in Staffordshire are so closely tied to the downfall of powerful figures, and many believe the building remembers them all. One of the most frequently reported phenomena associated with the gatehouse is the sound of a bell tolling. Witnesses describe it as slow and deliberate, echoing through the air, despite the fact that no bell exists on the property. The sound appears without warning and fades just as mysteriously, leaving behind an uneasy silence. The bell is often linked to the building's grim past. In 1678, Lord Stafford was arrested here after being accused of involvement in a plot to assassinate King Charles II. Despite questionable evidence, he was later executed for treason. Some believe the phantom bell marks the moment of his arrest or the beginning of his sentence. Nearly a century earlier, the gatehouse also held Mary, Queen of Scots. In 1586, she was confined here for 2 weeks while under suspicion of conspiring to assassinate Queen Elizabeth I. Soon after her imprisonment at Tixall, Mary was arrested, again tried, and ultimately executed. The building thus became a silent witness to the fate of 2 individuals accused of treason against the English crown. Visitors and locals have reported sudden drops in temperature inside and around the structure, often coinciding with the sound of the bell. Some describe a heavy, oppressive atmosphere as though the air itself carries memory. Others report the sensation of being watched, particularly near doorways and windows. Paranormal investigators suggest the gatehouse may host a residual haunting, an echo of repeated trauma tied to arrest and condemnation. The lack of visual apparitions supports this theory, with sound acting as the primary manifestation. Skeptics argue the bell-like sound may be environmental or acoustic in nature, yet no natural explanation has ever fully accounted for its clarity or timing. Today, the gatehouse stands as a relic of power and punishment. But when the bell sounds where no bell exists, many believe the past is announcing itself once more. Here, judgment was passed in silence, and sometimes that silence still rings. The Picture House. Situated on Bridge Street in the center of Stafford, the Picture House now operates as a pub. Yet long before glasses lined the bar and music filled the room, this building served a very different purpose. Once a cinema, it welcomed audiences into darkness, light, and illusion, and many believe something from that era never left when the projector stopped rolling. One of the most distinctive phenomena reported here is the sound of an old film projector. During quiet moments, particularly late at night, staff and visitors have described hearing the familiar mechanical whir and rhythmic clicking of a projector running upstairs. The sound is brief but unmistakable, and no equipment capable of producing it remains in the building. Other activity is far more physical. Glasses have been seen sliding across surfaces on their own, sometimes stopping neatly at the edge of the bar. Chairs are occasionally found repositioned, and doors have been heard opening and closing when no one is nearby. Whispers drift through empty rooms, often too faint to understand, but clear enough to be noticed. Footsteps are frequently heard crossing the balcony area above the main floor. Witnesses describe the sound of slow movement, as though people are pacing or searching for seats. When investigated, the balcony is invariably empty. One of the most unsettling sightings occurred when a phantom couple was reportedly seen stumbling arm in arm through the building. Described as dressed in period clothing, They appeared disoriented, laughing softly before vanishing mid-step. The sighting was brief, but vivid, leaving those who witnessed it shaken. Staff members often describe the atmosphere as watchful rather than aggressive. There is no sense of threat, only intrusion, the feeling that moments from another time are intruding into the present. Some report sudden chills, while others experience the sensation of being observed while working alone. Paranormal researchers suggest the picture house may host residual hauntings where repeated actions from the past replay without awareness. The sounds of the projector and balcony footsteps strongly support this theory. Others believe the sighting of the couple indicates an intelligent presence momentarily aware of its surroundings. Skeptics attribute the phenomena to old architecture and imagination, yet the consistency of reports tied specifically to the building's cinematic past is difficult to ignore. The picture house continues to welcome customers seeking conversation and warmth. But when the room grows quiet and the lights dim, some believe the building remembers when audiences sat in darkness watching stories unfold on a screen that never truly went blank. Here, the film did not end. It simply learned how to play itself again. Sinai Park House, set behind trees and surrounded by a moat off Shobnall Road, Sinai Park House is one of Staffordshire's most complex and disturbing haunted sites. Dating back to the 12th century, the house has been shaped by religious conflict, betrayal, and repeated violence, and many believe it is home to more spirits than any other location in the county. The most frequently reported apparition is the Grey Lady. According to legend, she was once a moral young woman, sometimes identified as Isabella Baxter, a cook employed at the house. She is said to have been led astray by monks in the area and later revealed she was pregnant. Soon after she was murdered, possibly pushed down a staircase. Her spirit is believed to cross the bridge over the moat at Christmas time, and she has also been seen as a fleeting grey shape in the second attic room, staring from the window before vanishing. The grounds themselves are said to be active. Sir Henry Paget, a former owner and Wellington's second-in-command at Waterloo, is believed to roam the estate. Witnesses have also reported seeing two black dogs moving silently through the grounds, disappearing into darkness. A phantom hay cart has been observed approaching vehicles before fading away. One driver even pulled over to let it pass. Inside the house, activity becomes more intense. Crockery moves by itself, whispering voices and knocking sounds echo through walls, and the smell of smoke appears without source. Guests have reported being physically pulled or thrown across rooms while electrical systems malfunction unexpectedly, including car alarms triggering outside. Additional apparitions include a monk standing at the foot of a first-floor bed, Cromwellian soldiers and their dogs gathered around the fireplace, an 18th-century man lurking in dining room corners, and the figure of a hanged witch. A phantom coach has also been reported approaching the house before disappearing. Animals appear aware of the activity. A former owner's cat was seen following something invisible, with its eyes crying in distress. Paranormal investigators classify Sinai Park House as a multi-layered haunting containing both intelligent and residual phenomena. The sheer variety of sightings suggests centuries of trauma imprinted upon the site. Skeptics argue such reports grow through repetition, yet even those unfamiliar with the stories describe overwhelming unease. Sinai Park House is no longer open to the public, but many believe it does not need visitors. It is already crowded. Here, the past does not whisper. It overlaps endlessly. Horcross Hall, set back from Maker Lane near Burton-on-Trent. Horcross Hall is an imposing country house surrounded by woodland and manicured grounds. Today, it is known for comfort and refinement, yet beneath its polished exterior, lies a quieter, more sorrowful reputation. Unlike sites shaped by violence or execution, the reported hauntings here center on lost innocence and something left behind too early. Although no major activity has been widely reported in recent years, earlier accounts describe phenomena that deeply unsettled both staff and visitors. The most persistent reports involve the sound of a child crying within the building. The cries were described as soft but unmistakable, echoing through corridors late at night when the hall was otherwise silent. No source was ever found. These sounds were often accompanied by a sudden and localized chill. Witnesses reported cold patches forming in specific areas, particularly on staircases and in upper rooms, as though something unseen was passing close by. The temperature changes were brief, but intense, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. On several occasions, a young girl was reportedly seen within the hall. She was described as around 9 years old, wearing a long dress and a mop cap consistent with domestic clothing from an earlier century. Witnesses said she appeared calm and silent, standing still or moving slowly before fading away. No interaction was reported, only the unsettling awareness that she had been there. Unlike more aggressive hauntings, there are no accounts of objects being thrown or voices calling out. The presence at Horcross Hall is described as passive and melancholic. Staff members often reported feelings of sadness or emotional heaviness rather than fear, particularly when working alone in the evening. There is little documentation explaining the identity of the child. Some speculate she may have been a servant's daughter or a young domestic worker who lived at the hall during its earlier years. Others suggest the haunting may be residual, an echo of grief, replayed under certain conditions, rather than an intelligent spirit. Paranormal researchers note that child apparitions are often associated with emotional imprint rather than deliberate interaction. The consistency of the sightings and sounds supports this theory. Skeptics argue that old buildings produce misleading acoustics and that expectation influences perception. Yet those who heard the crying insist it was clearly human and deeply moving. Horcross Hall now presents an image of tranquility and escape. But for those who experienced its quieter moments after dark, the memory lingers. Here the haunting does not frighten, it grieves, and sometimes it cries softly where no child should be. Weston Hall, set along Western Bank near Stafford Weston Hall, is a grand historic building that has served many purposes over the centuries. Once a private residence, it later became an asylum for the mentally ill, a chapter in its history that many believe left a permanent mark on the building and the land around it. Visitors and staff have long reported hearing screams during the night. These cries are described as distant but piercing, echoing through corridors when the building is otherwise silent. The sounds often stop abruptly, leaving behind an oppressive stillness that many find deeply unsettling. One of the most frequently reported apparitions is a grey lady. She is said to move quietly through the hall and has also been seen walking the lanes nearby, particularly at dusk. Witnesses describe her as calm but sorrowful, her presence often accompanied by a sudden chill and a sense of unease rather than fear. Other figures have been reported within the building, including ragged apparitions with outstretched hands, described as gaunt and desperate. These figures are believed to represent former patients wandering the halls as though still trapped in confusion and distress. Their appearances are brief but emotionally disturbing. One of the strangest incidents involved staff arriving in the morning to find the bar area completely cleaned, despite the security system showing no signs of entry or activation overnight. Glasses were neatly arranged, surfaces wiped down, and chairs repositioned as though someone had worked carefully and deliberately in the early hours. Additional reports include staff hearing their names whispered by unseen female voices while working alone. The voices are often close-spoken softly into the ear, causing some to turn suddenly only to find no one there. Footsteps have also been heard moving through empty rooms. Outside, witnesses have described hearing the sound of horses pulling a carriage along the gravel path leading to the hall. The sound is rhythmic and unmistakable, yet the path is now covered with tarmac, making such noise impossible. Paranormal investigators suggest Weston Hall may host both intelligent and residual hauntings, shaped by years of confinement treatment and emotional suffering. The variety of phenomena supports this layered interpretation. Skeptics argue that old buildings produce strange sounds and that expectation fuels imagination. Yet many reports come from individuals unaware of the hall's past. Weston Hall stands today as a place of elegance and hospitality. But when night falls, some believe it remembers the voices that once cried out within its walls. Here, silence is not empty. It listens, and sometimes it answers back. The Potteries Museum and Art Gallery. Located on Bethesda Street in Hanley, the Potteries Museum and Art Gallery stands as a guardian of Staffordshire's industrial and cultural heritage. By day, it is a place of learning and preservation. By night, however, staff and visitors have reported incidents that suggest the building holds more than artifacts behind its glass cases. One of the most unsettling areas of reported activity surrounds the museum's aviation exhibits. The canopy of a Spitfire aircraft on display has been found open on multiple occasions, despite being securely closed and inaccessible to the public. What makes this particularly strange is that the aircraft never saw active combat service, ruling out any direct link to wartime trauma. Alongside this, witnesses have reported the unexplained smell of fumes and smoke appearing suddenly in the gallery. The scent is described as sharp and mechanical, reminiscent of fuel or burning oil. Fire alarms have been checked repeatedly, yet no physical source has ever been identified. Elsewhere in the museum, objects have been observed moving without explanation. Small items have shifted position inside display areas, and staff have occasionally returned to rooms to find objects no longer where they were left. These movements are subtle, not violent, but persistent enough to cause concern. Footsteps have been heard echoing through upper galleries after closing hours, often moving steadily, as though someone is walking from one exhibit to another. When security investigates, the building is found to be empty. These sounds are most commonly reported in areas associated with industrial machinery and transport. Staff members describe sudden cold spots forming in certain rooms, particularly near older exhibits. Some also report the sensation of being watched while working alone, especially during late shifts. The feeling is often accompanied by a brief sense of unease or pressure rather than fear. Paranormal researchers suggest the museum may host residual hauntings, emotional or environmental imprints left behind by the objects themselves. The repetition of activity in specific areas supports this theory. Skeptics argue that museums naturally settle and expand, causing movement and smells. Yet the consistency of reports, particularly around the Spitfire exhibit, remains unexplained. The Potteries Museum exists to preserve the past, but some believe that within its walls, history is not entirely contained. Here, memory does not stay behind glass. It moves quietly when no one is watching. St. John's Community Church. Standing on Woodbank Street in Burslem, St. John's Community Church appears modest and unremarkable. Yet its churchyard is associated with one of Staffordshire's most enduring and unsettling ghost legends, a story shaped by fear, superstition, and cruelty. The hauntings here are closely linked to the grave of Molly Lee, a woman who lived in the area during the late 19th century. Molly was widely disliked by the local community and accused of witchcraft largely because she lived alone, kept animals, and defied social expectations. After her death, hostility toward her did not end. Witnesses visiting the churchyard have reported hearing high-pitched voices, whistles, and faint cries, often when standing near Molly's grave. These sounds are described as sudden and intrusive, sometimes seeming to whisper directly into the ear before fading into silence. The language is often unclear, described by some as foreign or distorted. A female apparition has also been reported near the grave. She is said to appear briefly standing still or moving slowly before vanishing without sound. Many believe this figure is Molly herself, returning to the place where she was denied peace, even in death. One of the most unusual elements of the legend involves Molly's pet blackbird. The bird has reportedly been seen hopping around the churchyard long after Molly's death, appearing suddenly and disappearing just as quickly. Locals consider its presence deeply unsettling, believing it to be tied to the events that followed her burial. According to local accounts, a visiting reverend intending to confiscate Molly's belongings was frightened by an apparition of her inside her former home. Fearing witchcraft, authorities ordered her coffin to be reopened. An exorcism was performed, and the blackbird was allegedly sealed inside the grave, with her an act many believe intensified the haunting rather than ending it. Visitors to the churchyard often report feelings of unease, sudden chills, and the sensation of being watched. Some experience nausea or dizziness when standing near the grave for extended periods. Paranormal researchers classify St. John's as a site of folk haunting rooted in social injustice and fear rather than violent death. The persistence of the phenomena supports this interpretation. Skeptics argue that the legend fuels imagination. Yet many encounters are reported by visitors unaware of Molly Lee's story. St. John's Community Church remains a place of gathering and reflection. But in its churchyard, some believe the past still speaks not in anger, but in protest. Here the dead were never allowed to rest, and neither, it seems, is their memory. Leonard's churchyard. High on the Staffordshire moorlands, St. Leonard's churchyard sits exposed to wind, mist, and silence. The church itself is ancient, and the surrounding graves stretch back centuries, creating an atmosphere that many describe as heavy and watchful. Visitors often remark that the churchyard feels isolated even on bright days, as though the land itself resists comfort. One of the most disturbing phenomena reported here involves disembodied voices. Visitors have described whispers heard directly in their ears while walking among the graves. The voices are often described as speaking in a foreign or unfamiliar language, quiet but deliberate, causing witnesses to stop suddenly or turn around in shock. No one is ever found nearby. These whispering experiences are usually brief but intense. Some people report a sudden chill at the same moment, while others describe dizziness or a sensation of pressure around the head. The voices rarely repeat words, clearly leaving behind confusion rather than understanding. Another long-standing legend associated with the churchyard centers on Horsley's Stone, a standing stone located nearby. According to local folklore, a small spectral bird appears near the stone on certain evenings. Unlike many ghostly manifestations, this bird is said to be an omen of good luck rather than misfortune. Witnesses describe it as pale or faintly luminous, appearing briefly before vanishing into the air. The contrast between the unsettling whispers and the benevolent bird has puzzled researchers. Some suggest the site may contain multiple layers of folklore, one rooted in fear, the other in protection. Standing stones are often associated with pre-Christian ritual, leading some to believe the land itself carries older beliefs that coexist with the churchyard. Visitors have also reported sudden silences, where wind and wildlife noises stop completely without warning. In these moments, the churchyard feels unnaturally still, heightening awareness and unease. Footsteps have occasionally been heard behind visitors, only to stop when they turn. Paranormal investigators classify St. Leonard's as a land-based haunting, where phenomena are tied to location rather than individual spirits. The lack of visual apparitions supports this theory. Skeptics argue that wind patterns and expectation influence perception, especially in such an exposed setting. Yet many reports come from those unfamiliar with the legends. St. Leonard's churchyard remains a place of burial and reflection. But among its stones and whispers, some believe the past still communicates not through faces or forms, but through voice and symbol. Here, the dead do not appear. They speak softly when you least expect it. Regent Theatre. Standing on Piccadilly, in the heart of Hanley, the Regent Theatre is a place built for performance illusion and applause. Opened in the early 20th century, it has welcomed generations of audiences seeking escape and entertainment. Yet when the lights dim and the seats are empty, many believe the theatre continues to host an audience that never leaves. One of the earliest and most frequently reported sightings involves two elderly women, believed to date from the 1950s. Witnesses have seen them walking together toward the theatre, dressed in period clothing, only to vanish just before reaching the entrance. Their appearance is calm and unhurried, as though arriving late for a performance that has already begun. Inside the building, unexplained sounds are common. Loud bangs echo through corridors and backstage areas without warning. These noises are often followed by sudden cold spots, forming in specific sections of the auditorium and balconies. Staff working alone late at night describe the temperature changes as abrupt and deeply unsettling. A spectral lady is said to attend performances from time to time. She has been seen, seated quietly in the audience, watching the stage with apparent focus. Witnesses report that she disappears halfway through the show, leaving the seat beside her suddenly empty. No disturbance is felt, only the certainty that someone was there moments before. Other apparitions include a lonely-looking man observed staring out from a balcony, his posture still and reflective. A young girl has also been seen in the auditorium, standing silently between rows of seats before vanishing when approached. Figures have been reported rushing through backstage corridors, their movements swift and purposeful, yet never visible long enough to identify. Staff members often describe the sensation of being watched while working after hours, particularly from the upper balconies. Footsteps are heard moving across empty seating areas, stopping abruptly when attention is drawn to them. Paranormal researchers suggest the Regent Theatre may host a mixture of residual and intelligent hauntings. The repeated appearance of audience members supports the idea that emotional attachment to the theatre has imprinted itself on the space. Skeptics argue that theatres naturally amplify sound and imagination, yet many experiences occur when the building is empty and silent. The Regent Theatre remains a centre of culture and performance, but when the curtain falls and the house lights fade, some believe the show is not over. Here, the applause has ended, but the audience is still watching. Moira Furnace and Woodland. Hidden among woodland and waterways, Moira Furnace stands as a relic of Britain's industrial past. Built in the early 19th century, the furnace once roared with heat labor and danger. Today, the site is quiet, its brick structures preserved as heritage. Yet many visitors believe the surrounding woodland and canal still hold something far less peaceful. Over the years, numerous reports of paranormal activity have been linked not only to the furnace buildings themselves, but also to the paths, trees, and water that surround them. One of the most disturbing legends concerns a man who drowned in the nearby canal after losing his footing while intoxicated. According to local accounts, his body was recovered, but his presence was not gone. Witnesses have reported seeing a pale, human-shaped figure drifting slowly along the surface of the canal, particularly in low light or misty conditions. The figure is said to move silently, gliding rather than walking, before fading into the darkness. Those who have seen it often describe intense fear, nausea, or the sudden urge to leave the area immediately. Disembodied voices are another common feature of the site. Visitors have reported hearing faint calling, murmuring, and indistinct speech coming from within the furnace buildings when no one else is present. These voices are often accompanied by an oppressive feeling of unease, as though the space itself is rejecting intrusion. Inside the structures, some guests experience sudden dizziness or sickness upon entering certain rooms. The sensation is described as overwhelming, but brief disappearing once the individual steps outside. Paranormal researchers believe these reactions may be linked to emotional or environmental imprints left behind by years of harsh labor and fatal accidents. In the surrounding woodland, footsteps have been heard following walkers along narrow paths, stopping when the witness stops. Lights have been reported flickering in the distance near the furnace at night, though no electrical source exists in those areas. Paranormal investigators classify Moira furnace as a land and structure haunting, where industrial trauma and human loss have combined to leave layered residual activity. The variety of reports supports this theory. Skeptics argue that darkness, water, and isolation heighten anxiety, yet many experiences are reported by calm visitors during daylight hours. Moira furnace is now a place of history and conservation, but beneath the trees and beside the canal, some believe the site still remembers the cost of industry. Here, the past does not rest underground. It drifts slowly along the water, waiting to be seen. Every place we visited holds more than history, it holds memory. If one story stayed with you, share it in the comments. Which location felt the most unsettling? This is Creepy Experience, where we explore haunted places shaped by the past and the silence they left behind.